been able to do this before previously in North America. DYL wanting to make their mark. Give it up, trainers. We're jumping into the leads. Koraidon, Fluttermane, Alpha WOLFE GLICK, and Urshifu Incineroar there for DYL.
Yeah, I like this lead from Wolf. The Fluttermane getting that activation of the photosynthesis. It is going to get the speed boost, really useful in the sun. Being set up off that Auraculcum pulse from the Koraidon. Now you've got the Urshifu on the opposite side of the field for DYL. It is putting a lot of pressure on to that Fluttermane, of course, neutral damage into it, but it's not the best defensively. And it has got the sash, so it's got a little bit of security. It is going to be able to avoid the fake out from that Incineroar as well because of the ghost typing, but it has to be careful. You don't want to lose that Fluttermane too quickly, but you can pressure back with a double up into that Urshifu slot. There is the Flare Blitz risk on the Incineroar on the opposite side, of course. You don't really want to take a Flare Blitz from the opposing Incineroar into your Fluttermane, but maybe going after that Urshifu if you really fear it. There isn't a bad play, and the Koraidon pretty comfortable to sit in front of it.
I think Wolf would like to be able to respond with an Intimidate off his very own with that Incineroar just to try and neutralize some of these threats. A close combat or coming through, or even the Sucker Punch will be devastating. So Fluttermane getting out of there. If Sucker Punch has been locked in, that is now going to fail into that slot as Incineroar, the great friend indeed, is going to join the field. This Intimidate is going to lower the attack of both the physical attackers on the opposing side and start to maybe have this fake out game going forward. The Incineroar on DYL's side is going to shut down the Koraidon. No offensive pressure coming through on this side, but the Urshifu is still yet to move. It's going for that Wicked Blow. So the Intimidate is null and void, but the Incineroar being that Dark Tide, the perfect switch in here for Wolf.
Yeah, great switch for Wolf, taking that Wicked Blow really comfortably from the Incineroar. Now has the fake out on their side, pressuring down on the Urshifu now to break the opposing sash there, which is so important. And the Incineroar on DYL's side cannot be so safe either because the close combat boosted by that life orb, boosted by the sun, it is going to be threatened even though the Intimidate's dropped onto that Pokemon. There is the threat of a potential target into that slot, hasn't got Protect, so you have to be very careful. You can't really easily pivot it out, and you've got to be careful if you are bringing something else in on that potential close combat.
Well, Incineroar's going to leave the field just as quickly as it's joined. I think the utility of that Intimidate has been very effective here as the Fluttermane can rejoin, maybe trying to scope out these Sucker Punches that are going to come through. Of course, if you're Wolf, you're going to try and break that Focus Sash on that Urshifu, otherwise it is going to be hanging around. The speed heightened up on Fluttermane's side, so if it is able to hang on in this turn, it's going to be able to apply some pressure going forward. But straight away here in game one, the Incineroar on DYL's side of the field is going to terrestrialize into that Ghost type.
Yeah, suspecting maybe a close combat into that slot. The threat of it there, one way to get around it is that Ghost terrestrialization, and just a detect from the Urshifu wants to preserve that sash, didn't want to lose it to that fake out as the close combat is targeted into that slot. Not want to risk it into the Incineroar. Really smart play here from Wolf, but the U-turn coming out, the pivot is in action. The Incineroar able to get off the field and allow DYL to get something else on. Maybe the Miraidon is going to come onto the field, get that electric terrain set up. Between that and the Urshifu with that Sucker Punch in particular, you can get around the speed boost on that Fluttermane, pressure that sash, terrestrialize and put a lot of pressure onto the Koraidon. Not going to be just yet though, it is the Farigiraf.
Truly beautiful turn here for DYL, being able to position that Incineroar in the back for later to keep intimidating down against its opposing Koraidon, and now you have the Farigiraf in play. This is the Pokemon that can maybe switch up the speeds. If you go for a Trick Room, considering we know that the Fluttermane and the Koraidon are so offensively fast, and we saw in top 8 that they do have the potential to speed tie as well, switching up the speed could be very beneficial for DYL.
Yeah, it could be, and I think that's the one thing you have to worry about. Do you commit though if you're Wolf into that Farigiraf with a double target, maybe terrestrialize, go for the Flare Blitz, go for that Moonblast into the Farigiraf, hope that it is enough to get it, especially because the Electric Seed hasn't been activated. Now you are seeing a pivot, the Intimidate coming back onto the field. That's going to be pretty important onto that Koraidon in particular because it is now at -2, so those close combats, those Flare Blitzes aren't going to be hitting anywhere near as hard as they would be at neutral damage.
Well, Wolf is going to go for the Fire Terrestrialization on that Koraidon. It has now taken 2 turns of Intimidate, but this Terrestrialization is going to boost up those Fire-type attacks in the form of the Flare Blitz or Flame Charge. Fluttermane is going to go for the Shadow Ball.
What a call!
This is going to do a huge chunk of damage, really putting Incineroar into the danger zone. Koraidon is able to follow up with this Flare Blitz in the sun. It's going to be able to connect down onto the opposing Incineroar and get the knockout. It no longer has to deal with Intimidate, but Farigiraf is unscathed in this turn. If it wants to go for a Trick Room, it has free reign to do so.
Yeah, we see the double up into that slot, really smart as well, saying, well, if the Incineroar doesn't come in, I'm going to be able to break the sash with the Shadow Ball anyway, and the Flare Blitz with the sun at -1 will be enough to pick up the knockout on this big threat. It does leave that Farigiraf open open though. It goes for the Trick Room. It is going to be able to flip the dimensions. So the Fergraph in a really nice, comfy position. We know that there is the Urshifu in the back. It will be able to come in, of course, and it's going to underspeed or outspeed in the Trick Room this Fluttermane and the Koraidon. The thing is now, though, the Fluttermane has got its Sash broke, so it's going to be susceptible to be knocked out by a Wicked Blow. Koraidon is taking a lot of damage as well, and you think, is it going to be in range of a close combat? It's going to be very close anyway, and at -2, you might want to start to rethink keeping it out on the field. Is it worth trying to switch something else in, maybe like that Incineroar here to soak up a Dark Wicked Blow, a Dark type attack, and drop and Intimidate onto that Urshifu?
That's the thing, you don't even need the Sucker Punch anymore. That Urshifu, I think, is going to be sitting very pretty in the Trick Room for now. It's also been able to shake off that Intimidate by switching out, so unless Wolf wants to bring that back in, moves like the Sucker Punch or the Close Combat, I think, would be obviously the more optimal one here, will be able to hit with full force. The damage coming through from the Psychic is going to put Koraidon in range from anything that Urshifu wants to throw at it in the following turns, but Fluttermane is the target. That guaranteed critical hit gets the KO, and Wolf goes down to Pokemon.
Yeah, taking full advantage of this Trick Room. We see the Wicked Blow is able to pick up the Fluttermane. With the Close Combat, the defense drops. You know, the one thing that is keeping that Urshifu on the field is that Focus Sash, all important. Dill was able to keep that intact. We saw it switch out earlier to come back onto the field when the Trick Room's up. Now able to stick around and pressure with even a Sucker Punch or another Wicked Blow, depending on what comes in for Wolf.
It's obviously unfortunate for the Fluttermane, but even if you protect thanks to Unseen Fist, it was going to take that damage from Wicked Blow anyway. And at least with the KO, the trade-off is you've got your Amoonguss in Trick Room. This Pokemon is perfect for this.
Yeah, it is perfect because it's going to underspeed everything it threatens with Spore. You have to be careful though, because if the Miraidon's lurking in the back for Dill, it comes in, it will set that Electric Terrain, and everything on the ground will have that immunity. So you don't really want to waste a turn. Maybe going for the Sludge Bomb into that Urshifu slot isn't a bad idea. There is the Protect possibility coming out from that play, or maybe even the switch. So even getting damage onto an incoming Miraidon can be useful. The Koraidon, of course, is going to be at risk if picked up by the Psychic. So maybe a switch there into the Incineroar now. It's pretty safe in all accounts. It keeps your Koraidon around for later on when the Trick Room's gone, and it allows you to drop an Intimidate. You have the immunity to the Psychic, and you're able to have an active Fake Out going into the next turn.
Yes, with no way to change the Trick Room, Wolf does have to commit to playing in this environment, so switching out that Koraidon, preserving it for when Trick Room is over, if he's able to get through those turns safely, is a really nice play. Miraidon joins the field, not only does it stop the Spores from Amoonguss, but does finally activate that Electric Seed onto the Farigiraf, so it's going to have a defense boost to contend with. Koraidon leaves the field, as we were saying. It's going to try and stay nice and safe in the back when Trick Room is over, but also critically reset those Intimidate drops that it took earlier. The Incineroar is able to join on Wolf's side now, however. The Intimidate not really going to be able to do anything here, and you can't fake out in the next turn either, thanks to the Farigiraf being on the field.
Yeah, good call there, and the Sludge Bomb just going into that Farigiraf, wanting to just get some damage off, and then response, super effective Psychic into the Amoonguss, going to start chipping away at that side of the field. The sunlight has faded now, so their 5 turns have gone, and in turn we're seeing the Electric Terrain hit the field. Like you say, no fake out from the Incineroar as long as that Farigiraf, the Armor Tail, is active on the field. So the Incineroar not in the greatest spot to be able to slow that Miraidon down. You do have a Amoonguss with that Rage Powder though. It is something that you can take advantage of. The problem in the Trick Room is you pull in a Psychic from that Farigiraf, it could be enough to pick up the knockout, and then if the Electro Drift is selected, it will be redirected into the Incineroar, and we know how powerful that Choice Specs Electro Drift can be under the Electric Terrain. Wolf doesn't have a way to get rid of that or remove it from the field, so you're going to have to contend with it. Why we're seeing a Protect come out this turn.
Yes, wise defensive play here on the Incineroar, just trying to give it some longevity on the field, as Amoonguss can follow it with another Sludge Bomb, but you can see it's really doing negligible damage, whereas the Psychics are stacking up. Amoonguss so close to being KO'd here. The special defense is going to drop. I don't think that's really any relevance here. Electro Drift was going into the Protect though, so Amoonguss is able to hang around. Obviously it has that Regenerator ability, so if Wolf does want to switch it out, it can get some HP back, but then you're going to be exposing your Koraidon. He doesn't want to do that either.
No, definitely not, and there is this almost pin situation here where if you want to activate that Regenerability, you're going to be bringing in your Koraidon. It's going to be weak to the Psychic. It's an easy choice for Dill to go for the Psychic into that slot, so you either pick up the Amoonguss now and then force the Miraidon in, Koraidon in the next turn, but the Incineroar is a sitting duck right now. The Electro Drift going to be enough. Yes, you're going to be able to get an attack off, but is it going to be enough to pick up either of these targets? I don't think so from this range.
I really don't feel like Amoonguss and Incineroar, even if they were able to get the double up and bypass the Psychic, would be able to get the KO on the Miraidon, and we know that it is Choice Specs locked into that Electro Drift. It's going to be devastating no matter which target it falls into. Having a little look at the selection, Amoonguss playing defensively, just going for the Protect, wants to try and ensure that there will be 2 remaining Pokemon in the next turn, as Incineroar tries for the double but fails. DYL is now free to go for all the damage that they want on this turn. The Frigoraph goes into the protector. The Amoonguss was just trying to get the knockout there, but instead, now the Miraidon free to target down this Incineroar with the Electro Drift. So much damage in the Electric Train, and will be able to get the knockout.
Yeah, and really well played from DYL. Wolf in the worst position there with the Trick Room still active, not able to reposition, but the Trick Room does end. You can see why that double protect from the Incineroar would have been so useful there. It would have meant when one thing went down, the Koraidon can come back in, and if it does outspeed this Miraidon, we don't quite know these speed tiers yet. If it does, we know it is a very fast Koraidon from information yesterday, but we don't know the interaction between these two. If it can outspeed, it can put a bit of pressure on, but you're going to be relying on that close combat here, and you can't forget about the Frigoraph. Yes, you can use the Rage Powder for one turn, use the Amoonguss as a sponge, sacrifice that, and put all your eggs in one basket with that Koraidon to try and pick up a knockout on this Miraidon.
The issue, however, is if the Amoonguss goes down, then it's just Koraidon against the remaining Pokemon on DYL's side of the field. Even if you're able to get a KO now, you can't even go for the Flare Blitz thanks to the recoil. That's going to be able to KO the Koraidon in return, so it's kind of limited to the options that it can go for. Yes, the sun is in the sky, so you're going to be able to apply a little bit of pressure there, but unfortunately, I'm not sure it's going to be enough. Amoonguss, however, just goes for a protect, says, Koraidon, you're on your own. You've got to carry this on your own back. As it goes for the close combat, that targets down into the Miraidon. It's not enough to get the knockout, though. The bulk of that Miraidon is intact. It is, of course, going to have its defenses lowered, but I feel like that is null and void at this point, thanks to the low HP. It's got a Miraidon cleared to go for the Electric Drift once again and KO its counterpart. Yeah,
that's some really good information. Now, I think Wolf kind of knew the outcome of this match coming into this turn, knowing that even if I do attack, I'm going to take Life Orb recoil damage, and I don't have enough health to kill the remaining Pokemon. So I think using the information wisely to see how much this close combat does into the Miraidon. Let's see if I can pick up a knockout, because if I can take that information into game 2. So really key information, but you've got to take your hat off to DYL. Really playing a great first game here, locking out most options that Wolf had there, really pinning him in, especially with those Trick Room turns in play.
I have to say, I really like the lead that Wolf led. It gave him a lot of utility options about whether he wanted to try and control the speed with Icy Wind or maybe try and get some offensive pressure off with the Koraidon. But DYL called it perfectly, bringing in their own Urshifu and Incineroar to apply pressure in return and force Wolf onto the back foot very early doors was masterfully played.
Yeah, and the terrestrialization as well of the Incineroar, I think, although it didn't really pay off in that turn, I think it gives DYL the ability to bring it back in pretty freely after that. We are seeing a helping hand from the Frigoraph, going a little bit over the top to get this Amoonguss and close this game 1 up. As you see the Electro Drift into the little mushroom, and it will be enough to close this up. DYL taking game 1.
Not just a helping hand, but a round of applause for the game 1 that goes to DYL. 1 game away. You're saying it there, audience. Miraidon, 1 game away from becoming a European international champion. But WOLFE GLICK has been in situations like this before. He has so much wisdom and experience and will have taken knowledge from that game 1. And is it possible he can adapt it and push to a game 3?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if there's any player that can do it, it is going to be Wolf. I think he learned a lot from the speed interactions for 1 in that last game, knowing that the Koraidon likely does, he maybe suspected it, does outspeed the Miraidon. It can't pick up the knockout, or it's very close to picking up the knockout onto that Miraidon with the close combat, especially under Intimidated, as long as the sun's up with the Life Orb. So something like the combination of that Flutter Mane, Icy Wind, close combat could be a real play in being able to get rid of that threat if you find yourself in a similar situation going into game 2. Like we were saying, looking at the replay, the terrestrialization, the ghost typing on that Incineroar allows it to then switch in, because I think it's risky switching the Incineroar back in to drop an Intimidate, because I think with the Life Orb, with the sun in the sky, it is going to be still susceptible to going down to a close combat, even at -1. So the ghost typing just gives you that complete alleviation. Obviously, you have to worry about the Flare Blitz then, but it might be a little bit easier with a Dragon type in the back end switching around a Flare Blitz than it is the close combat.
Very true, and also something that was difficult for Wolf to deal with was that Urshifu that was on the field. Just applying so much pressure with the Wicked Blows that can obviously bypass the Intimidates that the Incineroar was bringing to the field, as well as applying so much pressure with the Sucker Punch to that Flutter Mane. Wolf's Flutter Mane is a key piece in his team, being able to go for the Icy Wind to lower the speed if something like Iron Treads maybe came to the field and got its Quark Drive boost. At the same time, moves like Moonblast and Shadow Ball can deal a significant amount of damage. So being able to kind of neutralize it straight away and force it to play defensively was wonderful. And even if Wolf is able to get damage on the Urshifu, you have to double up into it thanks to that Focus Sash, and that does not give you room for error.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think we saw in that first game as well. The Fluttermane does have the Focus Sash, so you would say it's got that little blanket of security for itself, but unfortunately that was broken earlier in the game where Dill was really quite careful about protecting that Urshifu, getting it off the field as soon as possible, and the way that they managed to engineer the Trick Room was masterfully done. We are getting into Game 2. Give it up for our trainers here in London for the Game 2 in this Masters Final.
It's the same leads coming out here from Wolf, the Fluttermane and the Koraidon, but a little change up here on Dill's side of the field. You got the Farigiraf and the Incineroar. This looks primed to try and get Trick Room set up here, Lee.
Yeah, the Trick Room that we've got here is a really good option once again. It's coming a little bit earlier in the game. You've got that Intimidate initially dropping down, and the possibility as well of the Incineroar going for that Ghost Terror type, because you want to try and remove it, right? But you're going to have to deal with that Fake Out first. The Koraidon is in a really awkward position. Do you maybe get it off the field now, maybe try and get the Amoonguss onto the field a little bit sooner to try and utilize that, and utilize as well that Fluttermane to try and just get damage onto that Farigiraf while you've still got it on the field active. It's immune to the Fake Out, might have a free turn here.
Yes, you also have to contend with the fact the Incineroar can switch out, maybe bring in something like the Miraidon that can do so well in Trick Room like we were seeing earlier. However, Koraidon is being banked on here, going for the terrestrialization. It is going to take the Fake Out, however, it's not going to be able to move and show off its prowess. However, Fluttermane can get that Moonblast off. It goes into the Farigiraf. It is going to lower its special attack. That might help out with the Psychics going forward, but it is not going to be enough to stop the Trick Room going up. And now Wolf has two very speedy Pokemon on the field. Not happy with this.
Yeah, this is better though. I think, yeah, the Koraidon couldn't move, couldn't pick up the knockout onto the Farigiraf, but the thing is, the Incineroar is still on the field now, and it has to take a turn to either switch out to get something else in that's going to be a little bit more better offensively to deal with the Koraidon, because obviously the fire typing now going to be resisted by the opposing Incineroar, and it is still threatened by a close combat into that slot, whereas the Farigiraf as well has taken a lot of damage from that Moonblast. Another one will put it in range for something like a Sludge Bomb, but preserving it quite smartly, wants to keep that Sash intact for later on in this game, and Incineroar a great option to bring back onto the field for Wolf.
Yes, could easily have been tempting to go for the Psychic and the Flare Blitz. The Incineroar on Dill's side may be able to capitalize on the sun being in the sky, but instead goes for the knockoff, removes the Life Orb from the Koraidon, so it's going to be dealing even less damage going forward. The close combat going down into that Incineroar, though it is going to be able to hang on. That knockoff was critical.
That is a huge play from Dill, so smart as well. You think the Life Orb going, you wouldn't mind it because you lose that additional recoil, but we see the side roar is into the Incineroar, going to get a free pivot out. This is a really great use of that move, and we're going to see that Miraidon hit the field. It's going to activate that electric terrain. It's not only going to activate the Hadron engine, but it's going to activate the electric seed on the Farigiraf, give that further defensive boost to this Pokemon, and make it even more difficult for this Koraidon. Now it has lost that Life Orb to pick up the knockout. The sun's still in effect, but it is in a really awkward spot because, yes, you do have Incineroar on the field. You do have Fake Out, but oh, wait a minute. The Armor Tail is in effect by the Farigiraf. It is going to block that. So you're in a pretty tricky situation. You haven't really got anything that you're going to be able to remove the Miraidon. It's easy able to lock into that Electro Drift and pick up either of these targets now.
I don't know what was bigger, the roar from the Farigiraf or the roar from the crowd when we saw that animation come through. A beautiful play, synergetically bringing the Miraidon in, giving Farigiraf even more defensive capability. It's really shutting down the pressure that Koraidon was exerting early on in this game. Farigiraf's kind of done its job here. It's able to get out, bring the Iron Hands to the field. This is another Pokemon that really wants to become a European champion. It has got its Quark Drive boosted, its attack is raised. It's now going to be able to apply a lot of pressure going forward. Koraidon just playing defensively here, knowing that it has to rethink going forward into these next couple of turns, as Incineroar does at least manage to get the parting shot down onto the opposing Miraidon. This is going to lower its special attack and mean that it's not maybe going to be able to get these KOs that Dill so desperately wants.
Yeah, this is a really smart play, especially if you get the parting shot into something like the Amoonguss. It's in the back. Lowering that special attack is so important. Again, there's a big physical special attacker here. And now the Iron Hand's on the field, you are going to have access to Fake Out the next turn, which is a bit of a detrimental thing for Wolf because he's just protected that Koraidon. It can't really go for an attack this next turn. It is is going to be forced to switch out, and maybe that opens the door for DYL to switch something in. But the one Pokemon that you want next to maybe the switch up is something with redirection, and you can try and utilize that. You do have to be careful though, the fake out from the Iron Hands into that Amoonguss at least this next turn.
Yes, the Iron Hands can obviously go for that fake out, but if you're maybe thinking that the Koraidon could switch out, you can almost capitalize on that, try and get some damage out on the board, because it's not like the Amoonguss can spore with the electric terrain in play, and that's really where Amoonguss can be devastating in a Trick Room situation. So in a way, it's almost like DYL has completely pinned in Wolf here and can go all out on the offensive if they want to.
Yeah, and that again, a bit like game one here, really is a tricky position for Wolf to be in. But the one thing you would say different to that game one is that they've got all 4 Pokemon. So they have got the ability to switch around, maybe sacrifice things to get through these turns of Trick Room, which is going to be imperative to getting that Koraidon back on the field, wipe those Intimidates clean, and start stacking up the damage.
You also have to consider that Farigiraf is in the back for when Trick Room expires. Maybe it can get that set up again. Amoonguss is going to be the target of that fake out as Miraidon goes for the Volt Switch, shaking things up on the board state. Incineroar going to be able to take that reasonably well, but it is now in a vulnerable position for something from the Iron Hands going forward. If Iron Hands wants to go for something like a Drain Punch, that is going to be dealing a significant amount of damage. And with Incineroar coming back onto the field for DYL, fake out is once again in play. It might be that Amoonguss is going to be unable to move now.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It has been flinched this turn. It's going to potentially flinch this next turn. And Wolf, although has got the active fake out, can't really go for it because it's so easy to switch that Incineroar out again. And I think if you are DYL, you probably want to get it off the field as soon as possible to preserve it for when that Koraidon re-enters the battlefield. So you can drop that Intimidate again, drop that attack, and make your Pokemon a lot easier able to take those big attacks. We are going to see the Iron Hands just leave the field, doesn't want to really stick around too much now, even though it had those super effective attacks into the Incineroar, picking the opportunity to get a Miraidon onto the field and remove that parting shot drop.
Hadron Engine is engaged once again as Miraidon rejoins the field. Defensive plays from Wolf, though, with the Protect on that Incineroar as Amoonguss tries to get the knockout and does indeed onto that imposing Incineroar. Always nice to see Amoonguss get a KO from time to time.
Yeah, really nice play there. The sunlight is ending now and the dimensions turn back to normal. Not the best time, though, for Wolf because you've got the Incineroar out on the field. You've got the Amoonguss. They're the ones that you want active in the Trick Room, not out of the Trick Room. The Miraidon sitting in a really comfy position. You've got the fake out support from the Iron Hands. It's going to be able to go into that Amoonguss, and the Incineroar is a bit of a sitting duck here. Yes, you have Protect, so you could go for that with this turn, but does it get around it the following turn? Maybe you use this turn to protect the Incineroar, switch the Amoonguss out, get something like that Fluttermane onto the field to stop pressuring the Miraidon, and then it might open the door for you to weave back in that Koraidon at the later stage. Now the Trick Room's gone, the Farigiraf not on the field, so you can start trying to get that momentum swing back in your favor.
That's the thing, you can fake out the Amoonguss and stop the Rage Powder, and allowing Miraidon that's had that parting shot reset just go all out on the offensive here and get some damage on the board. The Iron Hands does indeed shut down that Amoonguss from providing redirectional support, leaving the Incineroar completely exposed to the follow-up from the Miraidon. It's going to be that Voltage once again. We know it's going to be able to get the knockout. Incineroar has been felled, and DYL has the utility to pivot in the Farigiraf in the back once again.
Yeah, and we do see that pivot in and out. It doesn't want to stick around on the field and commit to anything. It just wants to use that move to get the little bits of damage it needs to onto the field and allow that Farigiraf back onto the field. Because now you've got the option, right? If you're the Farigiraf, you haven't taken that much damage. It depends what comes back in onto the field. If it is the Koraidon now, it has got that Sun active, so the Flare Blitz would be a threat into the Farigiraf. It has used that Electric Seed as well, so it's switched out, undone that defensive boost. The Flare Blitz would be enough to pick up that and prevent another Trick Room. And yeah, the problem is, though, if you just see that Miraidon come in, it would resist that, and then it is going to be tricky, and you leave the Iron Hands kind of open to do what it wants. The thing is, as well, with the Iron Hands, it's probably not in the best of positions now. I think you probably want to set your Trick Room up, maybe get your Miraidon onto the field, get that Electric Train active as soon as possible, because as long as it's not, that Amoonguss is going to be threatening with those spores.
Well, there are no Intimidates on this Koraidon now, and as you mentioned, the Electric Seed is no longer available to that Farigiraf, so it could be a little bit more exposed. Depending on what Wolf has gone for here, the Miraidon could be in a little bit of a difficult spot. The sun is in the sky, the terrestrialization is on that Koraidon. Something like a Flare Blitz could be dealing some devastating damage. We know close combat isn't going to be enough to get the knockout. Iron Hands, however, very happy to get its Quark Drive boosted up, and Amoonguss providing that redirectional support with the Rage Powder, allowing this Koraidon to do what it wants with that close combat. It will go down onto the Miraidon, but as you can see, it can take that so well, and now Koraidon is exposed with the defense and special defense drop.
Yeah, it has, and you can can see the difference it makes not having that life orb. The Amoonguss being able to be a really valuable member of the team here, just protecting that Koraidon. And it can do it again here because the Miraidon's only option to get around the Rage Powder is locking in on that Dazzling Gleam. Well, it's not going to be super effective into the Fire Terror type on that Koraidon, leaving it open to going for another attack into the Koraidon. It does have to be careful how many of these it goes for, though, because these defense drops are going to start to stack up, and the Koraidon only has so much tank in the gas.
Well, let's have a look. The Rage Powder coming through once again. Amoonguss wanting to help out the Koraidon and leave it free to get some damage on the board. It's speedy, and it will be able to get the knockout on the Miraidon with a cheeky critical hit for style points in this final. Of course, now Amoonguss is going to take the brunt of whatever the Iron Hands throws its way, but I think this was critical for Wolf, getting rid of that Miraidon from play.
Yeah, the Amoonguss is so pivotal here. We do see the heavy slam. That is a big knockout from the Iron Hands, boosted by that Quark Drive. It is enough to pick up the little mushroom and pull Dill back into this game, but the one thing, the trump card Wolf still has is the Focus Sash and that Flutter Mane. It is going to be able to come back onto the field, and it will pressure that Iron Hands with super effective damage into that slot with a Moonblast, and maybe even a double up there. We know there's no Protect on that slot, so you could go for it, but doing that allows the Trick Room to be set up once again. But again, even if it does, as long as you can get rid of that Iron Hands, the Trick Room doesn't matter too much, because the Farigiraf hasn't got the offensive output like the other options that Dill had access to.
And it doesn't have the defensive capabilities of a Protect either, so if Wolf just wants to double up into the Farigiraf, deny a Trick Room here, yes, Iron Hands might be able to get the KO onto the Koraidon, but as you've mentioned, the Focus Sash is in place, so it's not going to have the range to get the Flutter Mane on this turn. The Terrestrialization is still in the back pocket for Dill, though. They're able to go for the Poison Terrestrialization on this Iron Hands. That's going to resist this close combat. It's going to resist any Fairy type moves that the Flutter Mane wants to throw its way, so this is a beautiful play. The Shadow Ball, however, is the target going down into this Iron Hands. Only does a minimal amount of damage thanks to the Assault Vest on there, really paying off, but the special defense is a nice little touch. Flare Blitz in the sun with the Terrifier, though, is going to come down into this Iron Hands. Is that enough? Yes!
It's a huge knockout from the Flare Blitz.
That's a KO, bringing down the Iron Hands, pulling Wolf right back into this game. The Farigiraf now all alone on the field. Koraidon even able to hang on despite the recoil that it took, and Farigiraf goes for the Trick Room, but unfortunately it has no friends by its side to get the damage in the next turn.
And like we said, all it takes is to double up the commitment into the Iron Hand slot. A really smart terrestrialization from Dill there to try and get around the threat of the close combat, the Moonblast that would be so detrimental. Wolf seeing through that. I need to get Chip onto that slot, going for the Shadow Ball instead. It wasn't super effective. It didn't do that much damage, but it did enough to set up the Flare Blitz, which is boosted by that terrestrialization in the sun to take that down. And now the Trick Room up, but Farigiraf on its own, on its lonesome. Can it turn the tables? Maybe not so much against this Focus Sash Flutter Mane.
Teamwork at its finest. The synergy between the Koraidon and the Flutter Mane there, being able to get the KO was critical there for Wolf. You could always have the option to try to stop the Trick Room, but actually it doesn't matter if it goes up if you can KO that Assault Vest Iron Hands that also couldn't protect. It was a prime target for that knockout. Koraidon playing defensively in this turn. Flutter Mane too, just trying to burn through one of these turns, maybe buy Wolf a little bit more time to think ahead to game 3.
Yeah, and there's no harm in doing this at all. You could go out on the all offensive now, but yeah, why need to? Take all the time you need here. The Farigiraf only has the Psychic that it can rely on. It has to target one thing at a time. Yes, you can go after the Koraidon now, but then again, you've still got to attack into the Flutter Mane. How many Psychics is it going to take to remove that? And we know that it's only going to take 2 Moonblasts to get rid of the Farigiraf, where you can go for the Moonblast now, put it into range, then the next turn go for the Protect. It's going to have to Psychic into you. That leaves you enough room to get that final Moonblast off, close this matchup. But more importantly, like we've always talked about, you can take your time setting up what you think about for game 3 once this game is tied up.
Yes, Flutter Mane does have incredible special defense, so it's sitting very pretty on the field. Really nice from Wolf to preserve it from the very beginning of this turn, and now reveal it at the end to clean up this match. The helping hand unfortunately isn't there, but there is a round of applause from the crowd for both our trainers as they go into game 3. Wolf evens the score, and now there is one game standing between these trainers and the champion title.
Wow, at times it just looked untenable for Wolf. He was pinned in, Dill doing a great job of that, but not giving up, using the Amoonguss so effectively in that game to get through those Trick Room turns and preserving his Pokemon. It's what he's best at, getting through the really tight situations and then taking the opportunity when it's presented, especially with that Koraidon after losing the Life Orb. You saw the damage difference onto the Miraidon earlier on in the game. But the big thing was keeping that Fluttermane right until that end point, bringing it in with that Focus Sash attack, has that security blanket, and allowed him to close up pretty easily.
You could see, though, that DYL was doing everything they could to neutralize this Koraidon. The Intimidates were there, the knockoff was there to remove the Life Orb, and this was an incredible turn where Incineroar was able to hang on. Koraidon even weakened here, and it was a fantastic strategy from DYL early on. However, Wolf was able to play around it. This was also awesome, seeing the Roar come through.
Brilliant play, yeah, just to utilize the fact that you can get an attack off, and you can also pivot out, make use of it on the Farigiraf to get something else on the field to keep that pressure in the Trick Room up.
It really did feel like Wolf had Koraidon as the centerpiece in this particular match and kept making sure the Pokemon, critically the Amoonguss as well, providing that redirection support and a little bit of extra pressure with a Sludge Bomb here and there to chip away at opposing Pokemon so Koraidon could finish up with the knockout later on in the match was really masterfully played. We really are seeing two incredible Pokemon trainers at work here.
Yeah, we are, and it all comes down to this third game and what both players can do. Can Wolf overcome the Farigiraf threat, the Trick Room threat early on, and if it can't, then can you get through those Trick Room turns again without losing too many Pokemon, too many resources? And I think if you're DYL, you need to make better use of those Trick Room turns, because fortunately in that last game, just weren't able to get the returns like they did in the first game. And maybe that's got something to do with bringing that Urshifu. We saw it not a choice in that second game, so wasn't able to come in and have that immediate impact, that immediate pressure with things like that Wicked Blow. And it has got the security of the Focus Sash, so you can sit in front of those big threats like the Koraidon and take an attack at least one turn and utilize the Wicked Blow, and then the Sucker Punch if the speed tiering isn't perfected for yourself.
I mean, Iron Hands is definitely the more traditional Trick Room Pokemon in that scenario, but as we saw with the speed interactions with the Koraidon on the Fluttermane, for example, Urshifu can actually do incredibly well in this particular matchup in a Trick Room environment. With that Focus Sash as well to give you an extra bit of defensive support, it could be a really nice way for DYL to gain command of the Game 3. Wolf, however, does of course still have options. We were able to see how expertly the Amoonguss was working in Trick Room here, unable to Spore, but able to just kind of protect the partner Pokemon. But Lee, it's Game 3 here at the European International Championships. The crowd is going wild. The trainers have got the leads out. Urshifu is back front and center with the Incineroar by its side and the Koraidon and the Fluttermane on the field for Wolf.
Yeah, here we go into Game 3. The Urshifu back for DYL, deciding it was the better play, not opting for it in Game 2, and it may have been the difference, but it's back. It is going to put on a bit of pressure this turn, especially because it's beside that Incineroar, it has the active Fake Out, and the Koraidon is now going to be susceptible to taking that attack, slowing it down for one turn. It does open the door for the Fluttermane though, because it isn't going to be susceptible to it. Has got the Moonblast into that Urshifu. Do you, if you're DYL, want to target down into that and maybe trade the Fluttermane for the Urshifu? Because Fluttermane goes Moonblast onto the Sash, Urshifu goes Wicked Blow in return. We're going to see it play out. It is the Fake Out.
Fluttermane going for the Moonblast here into the Urshifu, taking it right down to that Focus Sash. Koraidon, however, will of course be flinched by that Fake Out, and no Terrestrialization coming through from it either here. Koraidon, as you can see, cannot move, but Urshifu now primed to go for the close combat. That is going to connect into the Koraidon, but it's going to be able to hang on, but it's now going to be very vulnerable going forward. Not going to be as safe to go for those Flare Blitzes in the future.
No, I think a nice play as well. You shut down that slot, you go for it, because even if it protects, you get the attack into that Pokemon. And now you still have the Sucker Punch that you can go for into the Fluttermane. Not going to be enough to pick up the knockout, of course, with that Focus Sash, but you could go for the double up maybe with your Incineroar, but doing that's kind of dangerous because you're risking leaving that Koraidon alone. The Sucker Punch is not going to be enough to pick that up, especially when it's not terrestrialized. It is down to -1, so maybe that's a slot that you could say, okay, well, Fluttermane can deal with the Urshifu here. I will have to take a Sucker Punch for that. I've just got to hope that my opponent doesn't double up into my Fluttermane slot, but if you suspect that, you could protect the Fluttermane, use your Koraidon just to remove that Urshifu.
Exactly, because with the Sucker Punch going into a Protect, it's not going to be able to push through. Unseen Fist will be null and void, but Fluttermane is going to be leaving the field here. Koraidon potentially going to be the damage dealer in this turn, as Incineroar, the great friend to Wolf indeed, is joining the field, throwing the Intimidate down against both of these Pokemon. So if Urshifu does want to maybe try and go for the Sucker Punch on Koraidon or that close combat once again, it is going to be doing a little less damage. I feel like, however, if it's close combat, Koraidon is not going to be out of the danger zone here. Terrestrialization comes through once again onto that Incineroar. It is going to be the Ghost Terror type, maybe just playing defensively in case the close combat was coming down into that slot like we saw in game 1.
Yeah, and a really great Terastallization here just to keep the Incineroar around, so you've got those Intimidates for later. That Sucker Punch coming out, and what was that Incineroar slot? Not going to be enough to get any damage off there, and the tiny amount of HP, the Flame Charge coming out, putting that Koraidon one speeds that faster, and just utilizing that move that's not going to take as much recoil damage.
Yes, I really like the play there. You didn't need the huge amount of damage, but Koraidon sent the stun for Incineroar to capitalize on. Flare Blitz showing how it's done to get that knockout in retaliation.
Yeah, and a big trade here. The Urshifu essentially has been traded for the Koraidon here. I don't know if Wolf will be happy with that, the trade of the restricted for just one of the regular Pokemon. I don't call Urshifu too often a regular Pokemon, but like we say, the Koraidon's gone now, and you know for a fact that Dill's going to have that Miraidon lurking in the back. The big plus here is that the Fluttermane does, I banged on about it in game 2, still has that Focus Sash, which is the big thing. You need to make sure that you do protect it as best as possible. Now the Incineroar is the Ghost Terastallization. It is going to be susceptible to Shadow Ball. It's super effective, so you can utilize maybe your own Incineroar if it is faster than the opposing Incineroar on Dill's side to go for a Shadow Ball, Flare Blitz into that slot, knowing that there is no Protect on the Incineroar on Dill's side. The problem doing that, though, is, again, you're putting all your eggs in one basket, concentrating on that side of the field to remove a target, and you leave that Farigiraf open to get a Trick Room up, which if the Miraidon's in the back, it can come in, it will underspeed that Fluttermane, and a Psychic Dazzling Gleam or a Psychic Electro Drift would be enough to take it down.
You've got to pick your targets wisely, and Incineroar getting out of the way as Miraidon joins the field. As you were saying, Lee, this will bring the Electric Terrain to the field thanks to the Hadron Engine, and this is something that the Farigiraf is going to be happy to see as well. The Electric Seed will boost up his defense, so just in case Wolf has decided to target down that Pokemon slot to try and stop the Trick Room, it's now going to have that extra defensive capability in front of the Incineroar. Fluttermane, however, goes for the Shadow Ball. It's now going to connect onto the Miraidon. Now the Ghost Incineroar is no longer there, does about 1/3 of damage, but gets the special defense drop. That could be nice going into the following turns. Incineroar using the sun in the sky to do a little bit more damage to Miraidon, but it is able to hang on. The bulk that has been invested into this Pokemon is paying off dividends in this final as Farigiraf turns the Trick Room on once again.
Yeah, there's the Trick Room, and now that Miraidon is going to be slower than the Fluttermane, not slower than the Incineroar, but we've already seen the damage from that Flare Blitz in the sun. It is going to be able to take one pretty comfortably and return with an Electro Drift into either that Fluttermane or the Incineroar to pick up a knockout. The one thing that Wolf has, though, is access to Protect, so you've got to guess the target right if you are Dill. Maybe one of these Pokemon is going to Protect, but which one is it going to be? Is it going to be the Fluttermane or maybe the Incineroar, expecting the Fluttermane to not be the target here because it's such an easy one to go after because it's a more offensive threat.
Incineroar can always go for that parting shot as well and just try and lower the special attack on the opposing Miraidon and pivot into the Amoonguss that we know is in the back here. Incineroar joins the field, however, for Dill's side, so trying to throw that Intimidate down onto the Incineroar to do even less damage if Flare Blitz has been locked in to try and get the knockout on the Miraidon. Fluttermane is going to be the defensive choice here for Wolf, wants to keep it on the field, so just protecting it from anything the Miraidon can throw its way. As Incineroar does indeed go for that parting shot. That's going to reset the Intimidate as well. A really nice play from Wolf.
Yeah, really great to just lower that special attack. So important against this big special attacking threat. Of course, now, like you said, Lou, the Amoonguss can come in a little bit safer, especially if it is one of those electric type moves it will resist, and it has the ability to support the Fluttermane going forward. It's just the Volt Switch, though. It is going to pivot out, undo that parting shot, not really worrying about it, opening the door for one of those other Pokemon, the Farigiraf, to come back onto the field and support that Incineroar that's now landed, has got active Fake Out, and it is going to pressure with things like Flare Blitz, especially in the sun.
I feel like Amoonguss got in quite comfortably in this particular turn, but the issue is you're facing down against that Amoonguss that can apply pressure with a Flare Blitz going into the next couple of turns. The Incineroar can also go for something like a knockoff into that Fluttermane. Obviously, it will break the Focus Sash and remove it from the field in play, and that will then leave it vulnerable going forward. Wolf still has managed to preserve that Focus Sash, and I feel like he's going to need it once these Trick Room turns are over, so can he preserve it through the next couple of turns?
Yeah, he does have what you can look like as well. The Terastallization is still an option for Wolf. You can go for it to maybe take away the Fire-type weakness that the Amoonguss has, especially right now with the sun up. That Flare Blitz has become very, very threatening to the point where it could be enough to pick up the knockout, maybe forcing that that Incineroar back onto the field. If you don't want to do that, you want to utilize the Flutter Mane, you're going to have to go for that Terastallization, and it could be the difference between being able to take a Flare Blitz, take a Psychic, especially with the Dog type. You get that immunity, and that Farigiraf becomes no problem at all.
I think you called that beautifully there, Lee. This is such a great defensive play from the Amoonguss. The helping hand once again coming through from Farigiraf to help out that Incineroar as Amoonguss draws in the attacks with the Rage Powder. So it will be protecting the Flutter Mane on this turn from whatever devastating damage in this form of the Flare Blitz the Incineroar wants to deal out. It's still the Dark Terastallization, not enough.
That is massive, absolutely huge. The Terastallization, really useful if you suspected maybe the Psychic, the Flare Blitz, but the helping hand boosted, sun boosted Flare Blitz is enough. The Shadow Ball coming out into the Incineroar, and it will be enough to pick it up, but the trade has been made. The Amoonguss is gone, and it paves the way for Miraidon to re-enter the field and start piling on the pressure.
Both these trainers now down to their last 2 remaining Pokemon. Wolf is going to be forced to bring that Incineroar back onto the field, and on the opposing side for Dill, it's going to be that Miraidon. Now, the Trick Room turns are going to be a little bit dicey here. Of course, Incineroar can't go for the Fake Out either because of the Armor Tail on the field due to the Farigiraf.
Now, the interesting thing here is the sun's just faded. Now, the photosynthesis on the Flutter Mane has disappeared.
Gone.
So the speed drops. Now, it'll be interesting to see if the Flutter Mane, with that lower speed now, can underspeed the Miraidon in the Trick Room, because if it can, then it can obviously get rid of it with a Moonblast. But if it still can't, it depends on the build of the Miraidon, of course. If it is one of these slower, bulkier build Miraidons like we've seen pick up in trends, it will still be open to go for an Electro Drift into whatever target it wants.
I'm on the edge of my seat here. It all comes down to these last Pokemon remaining on the field and how these speed interactions are going to play. It is a choice specs Miraidon, so we know it has no utility to be able to protect. Farigiraf goes for the Psychic, though this is going to break the Focus Sash on that Flutter Mane, and if the Miraidon is able to move first, it's going to be able to get the knockout. Incineroar can go for the Flare Blitz here into Miraidon. It's not enough to get the KO, though. Wolf looking devastated due to the special defense drop. Burn coming through, but is it going to be too little too late? Miraidon in play to be able to still get a huge amount of damage off here with the Electric Drift. It is moving before the Flutter Mane.
Here we go, which is it into the Flutter Mane, and it is going to be enough to pick up the Flutter Mane and take Dill one step closer to winning this championship.
That special defense drop coming in clutch for Dill. Honestly, that was such a monumental turn in this grand final. Incineroar now facing down against the Miraidon and the Farigiraf, but it's a 2v1 situation.
Yeah, it's looking really difficult here. The burn does help, so you can protect maybe with Incineroar. Try and get that double protect off, because if you can get through. Let the burn tick down on that Miraidon and get rid of it. That might be a way out, because then the Incineroar beats the Farigiraf. It only has Psychic, and that would be easy enough for Incineroar to do. So let's see if that is what we're going to see play out here. It's going to come right down to it, though. We are going to see just a Psychic come out from... Oh, it is into the Miraidon. It takes it down. So it is going to be knocking it out. The Incineroar, because of the Trick Room still up, could have went for the Flare Blitz into the Miraidon, pick it up, knock it out, and now it locks the game. So Incineroar is able to close this out with Farigiraf's only option, able to go for the Psychic in it. It's immune.
I can't believe what I'm just seeing. Farigiraf here in a position where WOLFE GLICK is able to take the title. He takes his second international championship and becomes your 2025 European International Champion.